Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. Past guests as Legends Behind the Craft include Alejandro Russo from Candela, Paul Mabry from Pix, and Ryan Thompson from 10th Mountain Whiskey. If you haven't listened to these yet, be sure to check them out and subscribe. Today's episode is sponsored by Barrels Ahead. Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. In short, we help wineries and craft beverages producers unlock their story to unleash their revenue. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. I am super excited to talk with today's guest, David Mandell. David has spent the last 2 decades in the spirits industry as the co-founder of Bardstown Bourbon Company, the creator of the first caffeinated vodka, and most recently as president of Kentucky Owl Bourbon. He's an attorney by background, former chief of staff of the Federal Aviation Administration, and was counsel to the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for being on. So, David, I got to just jump right in and ask, how started off in law, wound up in spirits? How did that happen?
Oh my gosh! I mean, it's as you were reading that, I was thinking it's like a trip down memory lane, and it's been a wonderful one. It's been a great journey, and it's also been one that I have been extremely lucky for having been given the opportunity by so many wonderful people. I always believe you never get anywhere in life without help. And so anybody that tells you otherwise, there are a lot of people along the way that gave me an opportunity, especially at a very young age. And so, I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to school out at Washington University. I came back and went to law school because, of course, what does anybody do that goes to school and has a history major and an English minor, right? You go to law school. And of course, at the time, what was the impetus behind that was watching the O.J. Simpson trial. So I remember my father saying, "What are you going to do now?" So, well, I'm going to go to law school. Okay, well, but it was a wonderful training. And after law school, I was at a large firm in Philadelphia, a wonderful firm, Blank Rome. I ended up doing work on the election law fraud side of things. I was on the Bush recount, on one of the attorneys for George W. Bush in Florida. As a young attorney, it was really it's a great experience, regardless of what side anybody's on politically. But I came back from that, and I was offered a position in the White House, working for the administration. That's how I ended up as counsel to the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board and chief of staff of FAA for Marion Blakey, who was just an absolutely wonderful woman. And so how do you go from that into alcohol? Well, I was on a trip, and we were out. Really funny. We were meeting with Elon Musk at the time, who had the Falcon 9 rocket in a hangar in West Hollywood. And that evening, because FAA regulates suborbital flight, and that evening I was out with Dan Lind, who was a college roommate, and we were drinking Red Bull and vodka at the Sky Bar at the Mondrian. This is 2001, and so what are we doing? Why can't we just make alcohol that doesn't make you tired? So that's not a bad idea. So that's where it started. And, it was a remarkable journey from there.
Started with caffeinated vodka.
It started with caffeinated vodka. And it's one of those things where, he quit his job. I quit mine. We moved to, and it's not, quitting is really not the right word. I went to Marion, who's a dear friend now. And I said, I've got this idea. We put it all together. We've been working on it nights and weekends. And she said to me, I was in my late 20s, and she said, "You have to do it, and you got to do it." And we did, and we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment on the Lower East Side of New York. Myself and a woman named Garnett Black, who is also another dear friend and dear business partner, and we started this company out of as startup gets, and we learned the beverage marketing, brand building business on the street, and we built that company to 45 states, 5 international markets, about 28 employees, and we sold it in 2009.
Wow, that's amazing. What was that vodka called?
It's called Pink Vodka. It was the first caffeinated alcohol. And unfortunately, it is no longer around. I'd love to tell you it was a great success story, but it wasn't. It was a remarkable learning experience.
Yeah.
It was. And, it was one of those things where, we sold the company in 2008, right after the, financial crash, as, all of the fun money that went into fueling something like that, even though it was doing remarkably well, to be able to keep raising money and building the brand. So we decided to sell it. And then a year after we sold it, Four Loko came in, and then the FDA came in, and caffeine and alcohol was no longer favorably looked upon. So
I was wondering, yeah, when you first started, was there some challenges getting that approved, or just kind of slipped through the regular?
No, it's actually allowed, and it's still allowed to this day. I mean, the tobacco, the TTB, the Tobacco Tax and Trade Board, regulates caffeine and alcohol at 200 parts per million. It's a very clear standard, but not to belabor that whole story, but when the FDA got involved in the issue, it really kind of, it went from being a issue of regulatory approval to one of kind of, public pressure on companies putting caffeine and alcohol.
I get it. As far as like launching a spirits brand, that's one of the most difficult things to do. And we spent a lot of time talking about it on the show. How did you do it?
Well, I'll tell you something, and it's something I'm glad you guys talk about it a lot. I talk about it a lot. I talk to a lot of people that look to getting into the business, because everybody thinks that the beverage alcohol business is for lack of a better word, is a sexy business. It's not. It's a very hard business. It's extremely competitive. And people don't really understand, or many people getting into the business understand the challenges of building a brand, particularly as an independent company, building a brand not only in one small market, but then doing it in multiple markets, and developing what really ultimately it takes is, when you think about it, and I use this analogy often, to have somebody try something new, what's the opportunity to do that? You walk into a liquor store, there are 1,000 brands, on the wall. You go into a bar, rarely do you walk in, look at the back bar and say, hey, tell me about that product. You order what or you order something that you become very familiar with. And that is it's an emotional connection. You have to take something, you're drinking one thing, you got to get them to drink another, but not only do you have to get them to drink it, you have to get them to embrace it, to love it, then to tell other people about it and to buy it again. And it's an emotional connection that you create. And then you're asking them to put it in their body. So it's a very, very hard thing to do. And I'll tell you, we really learned that challenge at Pink. And then we took everything that we knew, not only in the space, but we took it and then we built Bardstown Bourbon Company, which was and is a tremendous success. So one was one of those great learning opportunities in business. We took everything that we had not only learned from beverage alcohol, but certainly I took everything I learned in law, in running an organization, helping to run an organization like the FAA, regulatory challenges, all of those issues, crisis management at the National Transportation Safety Board, and we put it into building Bardstown.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this Bardstown, especially the tremendous facility and that as a destination experience. But before I leave Pink, I want to that learning example for someone, an entrepreneur that wants to kick off their spirits brand. What advice would you give them?
Go slow, go very steady, and protect yourself. And so the biggest mistake we made at Pink Vodka was trying to go too big, too fast. Right. And you do see that often in the industry. And so go slow, stay in, one market for a much longer time. Now, again, the advice that I'm giving obviously depends on, the company and the reach. And, there's always for every one of these, there's always an example of something that, grows at a much greater rate, but you can usually pick out the reasons why that is the anomaly. Right. But, it's, don't let the exception, drive the rule here. But when you look at great brands, Tito's, it's a #1 brand in the country. They didn't leave Texas for 5 years. They've been at it for over 20. Patron took 25 years. Grey Goose took, 15 years plus, and they had large distribution behind them and significant investment. And so, there's for me, the advice that I give a lot of people that when they get into this is, go slow, really go much deeper rather than wider, because you can control much more of your destiny in a single market, and you also learn too. You really learn about your brand, and that learning process, you're going to evolve. It's going to change, dramatically as you begin to build the brand.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I hear similar variations of that often, but it's understand your market and going into one location that you understand. And also the other common theme that I hear is that if you build it, chances are they're not going to come. You've got to actually go out there and get the spirit into the people's hands, which requires a lot of boots on the ground.
You really do. And again, it's about creating that emotional connection. I really believe that. It's really about, you have to be able to create some sort of bond between a person and the spirit. And again, that goes from the bartender to the distributor, salesperson, the person ultimately buying it. What is it that excites somebody about this product that not only is going to make them want it again, buy it? Because it's one thing to get something for free. I think people get mixed up with, people are doing tastings and they're trying it and you're saying, oh, they love my product. Yeah, right. Because we gave it to you for free. Now, is it going to make enough of an impact that you're going to then go seek it out, purchase it, and then the ultimate is tell other people about it. And so, what we found, and I'll segue a bit into Bardstown, is one of the most important things that we did at Bardstown was create that destination where we were able to create not only an authentic experience and home around the product, but you're able to bring people in, you're able to hold them there, you're able to give them this incredible experience. And then guess what? That translates into the emotional connection. And they leave and they say, I love everything about this. I love the product. I'm going to tell people about it. And that goes for customers. It goes for bartenders. It goes for distributors, reps, having that place where you can immerse people. And then the challenge becomes, how do you take that culture and that experience that you've created there and bring it out to the market?
Sure.
As you build the brand.
When you're envisioning Bardstown, and for people that aren't familiar with it, give us a brief overview of what this, because a tremendous facility, tremendous collection of availability there. Paint us a vision of it.
Sure. So Bardstown Bourbon Company is currently the most sophisticated distillery, whiskey distillery in the country, and it is an immersive experience not only in producing its own products, doing custom production for others, but then restaurant, bar, visitors experience. So it is, we like to say, it was a celebration of the craft of making whiskey. No made up stories, no hidden legends, thoroughly about transparency and bringing the customer really close to the production. And that concept that we developed, we came out to Bardstown, and I came out to Bardstown in 2013. And my business partner, Peter Lofton, and then Dan Lynn and Garnett Black, who two of the other early founders, we hired Steve Nally, who is, the master distiller at Bardstown. But we started with one concept. We saw where whiskey was going. And then as we began to develop the facility, we purchased the land. We began to see this vision for doing custom whiskey production for others. It was a part of the business that in the industry that you had contract production, but what was missing there, and when I say contract production, this is you have a brand, you don't own the facility behind the production, but you would go to a Jim Beam or a Heaven Hill or a Barton and either buy product or have them produce it for you. But the challenge with that was you couldn't say where it came from. You really weren't getting great customer service because they're producing for you when they had spare time. So as the market began to change, all of those companies, they had to keep that capacity for themselves. So we said, wait a second, why can't we create a program to do great custom production for brands that are being, no longer able to do this production anywhere else, but we'll give them great customer service and we'll be able to produce anything that they want to produce. And so it was a great idea. We sold out the capacity distillery before we even before we even finished building it. But then we had to figure out how to do it. That was the great part.
That's amazing. And how did you go about soliciting these other brands to come into production facility?
So, that's what I did. That was a big piece of what I did when we were starting. So not only managing the construction and development of the distillery, but went out and we had the relationships and we met with them and said, here's what we're doing, and brought them in as we were building the facility. And there was such a need for it. And so we were able to, we sold out the capacity. And then came the challenge of, okay, now it's one thing having the idea. Now we have to actually, we have to be able to execute. And that's where, like everything in the business was an evolutionary process. And so we hired an exceptional team of distillery operators. We originally hired Tom Kroom, who ran distillery operations at Jim Beam, who helped stand up this operation of distillery. Began doing custom production, and then brought on John Hargrove, who was one of the greatest distillers in the industry. He was the superstar at Barton, to take us from where we were to where Bardstown is. You see it now in terms of using technology, efficiency, and the expansion of the distillery. And so we developed a first-class distillery operations team that had the ability to do custom production, and that means multiple different types of mash bills and the way you cycle them, just complex manufacturing. So, and then you're looking at your ISO certifications and your food safety certifications and all of the complexities that come along with producing for international customers, for large customers, for public public companies, or there is a lot that is involved. And so each piece was evolutionary. And as we then got production really underway and settled, we were able to turn our attention to building our own brand, developing the restaurant, developing the visitors experience. And that's kind of where we bring together that whole idea of, the restaurant was one of the greatest things we built at Bardstown. We immersed the visitors in a great experience. And then that translated into learning about the products, going on the tours, drinking in a great environment, having a wonderful dinner in this place where you would never expect to see it, in a very modern facility.
Yes, that is a tremendous facility. As far as from the productions, and a little bit of this comes from me being a little bit more on the wine side. And on your LinkedIn, you talk about how it's a Napa Valley destination, or styled after that, where it's like a full immersive experience. Previously, what was a touring experience like at a Kentucky distillery?
Well, it was, it's very interesting, because I like to believe that we at Bardstown really took the distillery experience to the next level. And you now see that since we built that facility, there's tremendous advancements across the board. It's really raised the bar for everybody else. So Makers put in a restaurant. They're now putting in a hotel. Jim Beam put in a full-time restaurant. Willett put in a full-time restaurant and bar experience. But, so that whole Napa Valley style experience is actually interesting. We use that analogy, but it's actually better than Napa in many ways. And if you've been out to Napa Valley, you know that, it is a protected, agricultural area, and you're not allowed to have a restaurant in the wine.
You might use like a Washington, like a Walla Walla type experience, because they do have the more restaurant experience.
You have a couple of places that have more like a little deli where they were grandfathered in, but you go to the wineries, you don't have a huge restaurant. They're not allowed to. And so we actually took it to the next level. And so you really do have now in many of the distilleries, and you see that this is where the trend is going. People want the food experience. They want the beverage experience. They want the whole hospitality experience, because it all wraps up ultimately into the product, because that's how you enjoy these products, so it's, it's very important. And to circle back, it is extremely important in developing that consumer connection to the brand, because when they leave there, they now, if you've done it right, they are now fans of that brand. in a way that it would be very hard to do that in a bar or in a liquor store in another city, for example.
Sure.
Very
Sure.
strategic, opportunity.
From what you learned at Bardstown, and you've moved, and now you're doing the Kentucky Owl real estate. How what have you changed and what have you kept moving into this venture?
It's interesting because everything is a wonderful learning experience. And so for Bardstown, we sold the company. Now it's been about 2 months. And so my former business partner, rest his soul, Peter Lofton, was founder with myself and my other two business partners. And so I stepped down as CEO of Bardstown in 2019, and I joined Kentucky Owl in October of last year to help them build their distillery experience right here in downtown Bardstown. So Kentucky Owl is owned by the Distillery Group. It's produced currently. The liquid is produced at Bardstown. It was one of our first customers. So there's a great connection there and a really deep personal one that I had myself with them. And they asked me to come help them in October of last year. And so it's really absolutely beautiful facility that's being designed, that we're designing here. So it's right in the middle of downtown Bardstown, 420 acres, an old quarry that is now filled with water. And it is probably one of the most spectacular environments in the United States. It may be in the world where there will be a distillery built. So imagine this peninsula surrounded by 5 different lakes now in the center of the bourbon capital of the world. And nobody knew that this even existed.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. So you'll move all the distilling over to the Kentucky Owl?
Well, so Bardstown is a great producer for the brand. So we'll have our own production there, but we produce with Bardstown. They're a great producer for us, and we're a good customer of the company. And so when we look at the quarry and the experience we're developing, and you ask me kind of what are we taking over. There are many similarities in terms of this connection to the natural environment, to transparency. Our architects are Shigeru architects out of Japan, and Shigeru has been called the accidental environmentalist. And so he's one of the most renowned architects in the world, but he believes in biophilic design. And that is a concept where the materials that you are surrounded by affect your mood and your everything about, your performance, all of those things. You're affected by the materials. And so the distillery is being built from heavy timber, mass timber, absolutely beautiful structure set again in the middle of this peninsula, surrounded by, millions of gallons of limestone water that will be used in the processing, of the facility and the cooling and the production. And so there's going to be a great connection to sustainability, but this incredible environment in which you're going to be able to. It's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning.
What stage of production is it in, or construction is it in right now?
So it's still in the design phase.
Okay.
We are in the process right now of designing the distillery, a beautiful visitors, what we'll be calling the interim visitor center, that the public's going to be able to come to while the distillery is under construction. So you can see the site, you can have tastings, you can begin to interact with the brand, you can tour. We're looking at having boat tours of the site during construction. So towards the end of this year, we begin to really ramp up in site development, beginning to put in the infrastructure for the site as we are designing the distillery, beginning building the interim visitors center. And then you have the next phase, or warehouses, and then ultimately larger distillery and other aspects to the property as it develops. Permanent visitor center, restaurant, all of those components.
That sounds fantastic. That sounds like a fantastic venture with a multi phases. If all goes according to plan, when do you expect to have the full vision online?
Well, that's a really good question, because the full vision, you could take this out 20 years. You could continue to keep developing and building here. It's that gorgeous. What we've done is we've sliced this up into different phases. And so phase one is really from now over the next 4 to 5 years of the development of the park. And then it goes from there. So, in this first phase, again, we build the interim visitor center, we build the pyramid distilleries, and we build the first warehouses, on the site.
And that kind of leads to the kind of a good segue to where we see the spirits industry going and moving forward, because you're looking out 15, 20 years already. And it's based what I'm getting, it's based on the customer experience, elevating it and drawing a closer emotional connection to the brand. Is that where you see the spirits industry going as far as growth?
Let's talk about it in terms of, let's talk about whiskey. And we'll kind of focus on there, and particularly American whiskey. And because I think generally speaking, the answer is, yes, but obviously you can break the spirits industry up into many, many different segments. But in terms of whiskey, you're certainly seeing that in Kentucky. You're seeing tremendous investment in distillery experiences, in the visitors experience, in growth of the distilleries. So just in Kentucky, we're looking at basically about $3.5 billion that's already committed over the next 5 years in investment and growth. So when you look at, Heaven Hill just announced, $135 million distillery in Bardstown. You've got Brown-Forman doubling, Sazerac, growing. Jim Beam just put in the new distillery. Bardstown Bourbon Company is expanding, and it goes on and on and on. And so what is everybody looking at? They're looking at the growth of the industry, both domestically and then internationally. And so when you begin to look at bourbon and American whiskey internationally, bourbon, American whiskey in the US is about $4.7 billion in sales last year. You have American whiskey is under $1 billion internationally. So it is massive potential for growth. And so if there's just even small movements from drinking from Scotch to American whiskey to bourbon internationally in markets like India, China, South America, even in Europe, Africa, there isn't even close to enough whiskey resting here in the state of Kentucky to meet the demand. So I think that's where you see the industry headed.
Bigger growth category towards that international market.
And premiumization internationally of bourbon, where it lags behind. And so it has really reached that, premiumization is driving growth in the American whiskey category. The higher the price, higher pricing of the products in that 50 and over, price point. Then you get into the, 80 and 100 and over, you have very significant growth in those price points in that ultra premium categories. And that's where you see the potential, really a lot of that potential too, internationally.
Oh yeah. And on the domestic side, and I'm a little bit of this, my naivety towards Kentucky. I'm a West Coast guy, and I'm really familiar with a lot of the micro whiskey distilleries here, which I'm a big fan of. I'm a member of a few. What's the micro distillery situation looking like in amidst all these like larger full-scale projects like what you're doing?
You're still seeing you're really robust strength in the craft, in the craft market. And, it's interesting because, COVID, the craft market actually did, I think, a lot better than, people were predicting it was going to be able to do, through COVID. Now, you certainly had distilleries that were hurt, when, tasting rooms were closed, but then you also had real expansion of, and you had a lot of markets where there was a lot of creativity in terms of being able to do takeaway cocktails, direct to consumer shipping growing. You've seen a real expansion of e-commerce with spirits that you did not see pre-COVID. It was the acceptance now of buying alcohol online and through different portals and, in different marketplaces, whether it's, marketing engines, whether it's Reserve Bar, whether it's local, last mile distillery like GoPuff and Drizzly, last mile delivery, sorry. So you're seeing this real expansion of the whole e-commerce side. And it's very exciting. It provides different opportunities for people getting into the industry and current businesses to reach consumer in different ways.
We had Josh Jacobs on the show a little while back. He's at Speakeasy, which is helping the micro
Great.
distilleries distribute
They do,
across.
they do a really, really good job.
But in Bardstown itself, you've got the large, Bardstown distillery, you've got Kentucky Owl coming on with another distillery. Is there micro distilleries in Bardstown as well?
Well, it's interesting. Bardstown is the bourbon capital of the world. We've got 12 to 15 distilleries, in a very small radius around here. Everything from Jim Beam, Four Roses, Maker's Mark, Bardstown, and then Willett, Preservation Distillery on the smaller side, but we have Barton here. I mean, so we have Log Still that is just coming online from a distilling standpoint. So you do have smaller distilleries, that are thriving here, along with the big guys.
And that would be like the rising tide just rises all ships.
Exactly.
Is you're all turning this to a destination, which leads us over to this Bourbon Festival that you're in charge of. Tell me about that.
Well, I'll tell you, it's really been wonderful. I'm the chairman of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and it's my third year as chairman. But the festival is going into its 31st year, and we have a whole new format that we launched over the last couple of years in, again, elevating the experience. So, this year, and I would tell you, get online, get tickets, and come out. It's September 16th through the 18th. You can go to kybourbonfestival.com and get your tickets, but it's 3 days, one ticket price, $125. It includes all your sampling. We've got over 40 different distilleries. So outside, beautiful environment, being able to go in, have great food, be able to drink, you can try try lots of different products. And the distilleries this year, we got, a great law passed here where they're allowed to sell bottles at the festival. So the distilleries selling specialty bottles that you can't get anywhere else. We've got a great partnership with Justin's House of Bourbon with the exclusive single barrel picks for the Bourbon Festival that sell over the course of those 3 days here. So if you are a lover of bourbon, you want to interact with the product in the most beautiful setting in the world where you have all the distilleries, you've got the master distillers here, you've got single barrel picks, we've got a charity, whiskey auction, we've got great food. And the beauty of this ticket, the idea of the 3 day, $125 is that, whether you come 1 day, whether you come 2 days, whether you come 3 days, you're getting great value. You come in, you come out, you go on your distillery tours, you stop back in, you go to an educational event, but you've got all your sampling included, and it is a great price. And it really is designed to help us meet our mission, which is to promote Kentucky bourbon, and Bardstown is the bourbon capital of the world. And we are a nonprofit charity that is designed to do exactly that.
Sounds fantastic. How many people do you expect to come this year?
Well, it's a good question. We're going to be, in the thousands. And so, we have more tickets. We sold out last year. All of our VIP experiences very quickly. We've done the same thing this year. But we're really trying to develop an environment there that is not overcrowded, that really has the right number of folks, so that you're not waiting in line. You're really able to interact, talk, learn, try the products. And that's where, that's what we're focused on.
Again, all about that experience and kind of elevating it and just really
all about the experience. But I tell you, get your tickets now. So it is in September, but it will be sold out.
So you mentioned, is this the first year that you're able to buy bottles on site?
Yes. First year, you're able to buy bottles from the distilleries. So last year was the first year we did the single barrel picks with Justin's House of Bourbon, and that is really kind of a specialty. We are doing that. They're a great partner for us in being able to exclusively offer those single barrel picks for the festival from each of the distilleries. But then the distilleries themselves can also sell bottles at their experiences in the festival, and so that leaves a whole wide variety of opportunities to get interesting things, to get bottles signed, having the master distillers on hand. I mean, it's really a beautiful experience.
Makes so much sense. I can never understand it, whether it's a wine festival or a spirits festival. It never can buy anything, maybe a T-shirt, but
right. And so
no sense. You're doing all this tasting. Everybody's excited, and they have to go home and find it.
Exactly. And so now it is at the festival, and it's great for, for the ticket holders. It's great for the distilleries. It's great for Kentucky. And again, this Kentucky, it is the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and it is focused solely on Kentucky bourbon.
As far as Kentucky bourbon, and you're advocating Kentucky bourbon, how do you position that to like your neighbor in Tennessee or just a general American whiskey?
Well, there's plenty of room for everybody, and that's the beauty of the market. And so, for this festival, we're based in the bourbon capital of the world, and our focus really is on, again, our mission is to promote Kentucky bourbon, and Bardstown is the bourbon capital of the world. And so that's our focus. And, in the past, we didn't have as clear of a mission. And so we wanted, as we kind of relooked at the festival and we made changes to improve the festival, we wanted to start with, let's have a very clear mission. Then let's make sure we hire, we've got a great president and COO in Randy Prossi, who runs the festival, ran the Wisconsin State Fair. He built the Gettysburg Craft Beer Festival. So we've got an entrepreneurial team. It's working very closely with our distillery partners in developing this experience. And I'll tell you, like any good business, we're evolving. We're 31 years, like we're now the second year into a 31-year-old festival, and as we're continuing to evolve, and we continue to change each year based on consumer feedback, and they're going to keep getting better.
And definitely listen to the customers. And what are they asking for? What's the biggest feedback?
The number one thing this year was we want all our sampling included in the ticket price. And so that was the biggest change we made from last year to this year. Also improving the experience of how you check in. Last year, it was challenging. So in the last 3 years since I've been chairman, the first year we redid the festival and we had COVID. We had to cancel it. The second year, we just barely got the festival off. But, at the same time, we were faced with, last minute changes, proof of vaccination, all of these things that, if you remember, dial back a year ago, it was amazing we got the festival off. And so we had it. It was great. But, like any good thing, you have to continually evolve. So we've looked at everything from doing fewer things better to making sure that we're creating the right experiences, to that, having that ticket that allows you to sample everything, where you're not having to buy wristbands and tear pieces off and going back and buying. We expect, our visitors to drink responsibly, and we certainly ensure that our distilleries that serve do the same. So this is a festival where people are enjoying. It's not about overconsumption, but this is about ease in being able to interact.
Yeah, that's excellent advice for anyone wanting to do a festival or any regional kind of experience. I can't emphasize how much I don't like getting that tasting card where I've got like a little thing that I've got to carry around and get signed off. It makes it so much more complicated.
It's so much more complicated. And again, at the end of the day, does it really? I mean, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And that's what we looked at. And we said, let's have all our sampling included. You have to be responsible anyway. We're going to be responsible, and the people that attend this event, the event is not, it is one where it's in that kind of environment. And it is, we not only promote and encourage responsible, consumption at every point, but the bourbon enthusiast, the connoisseur, that enjoys these products doesn't consume that way to begin with.
Yeah. They've got their dinners they're looking for that night. They don't want to, they're going to pace it out.
That's right. And that's what it's all about. And so we have all of those protections in place. We would have it anyway, whether you have a card, whether you have tabs, whether you don't. So the fact of the matter is, let's make it easy for the consumer to really have a great experience. And that's the driving force for this change and this new ticket.
I love it. I mean, this entire podcast has had a really just consistent common theme. I love it. It's all about elevating that customer experience so they can get that deeper emotional connection.
And I think that's what it's really about. And, and frankly, when you look across multiple industries, you see that, all over the place. People want to know, about their product. They want to know, particularly for things that you eat and drink. They want to know where it came from, what it's made from. Tell me the story about it. I want it to be authentic. It helps drive that connection. Is there a cause behind it? Is there, there's lots of different elements to it.
Sure.
But it's certainly what, people are interested in. And so
the more fully you can like flesh out each one of those elements, the deeper bond people develop with the product.
Couldn't agree more.
So as we're kind of wrapping down towards the end of this episode, I always like to ask who you respect most, or if you want to give any shout outs to people in the industry.
Well, I'll tell you, there's so many people that I could name in the industry. And I'll tell you one that certainly stands out. There are many, but we could spend all day doing that. But I'll tell you one that has not only been a tremendous mentor to me, but is, to this day, somebody that I talk to on a regular basis is Bill Samuels from Maker's Mark. And he was one of the first people that I met when I came to Bardstown in 2013. He is somebody that is not only incredibly, incredibly passionate and brilliant when it comes to everything from marketing to, experiences and even storytelling and the art of it, and really appreciating and developing those connections with people. But he is passionate about Bardstown. He's passionate about this community. He's passionate about supporting and growing it, both economically. And I'm not talking about just bourbon. I'm talking about what bourbon does for the community. And so he's somebody that has really, truly been a mentor, to me, and somebody that I enjoy working with on many different things.
That's very, very good. Very good. So where can people find out more about Kentucky Owl and you?
Well, listen, no one needs to find anything out about me, but I can tell you, I mean, it's not about me, but at the end of the day, certainly, you can find out about Kentucky Owl, kind of follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, go to the website. Also, again, for the Bourbon Festival, you get your tickets now, but and that's kybourbonfestival.com. Please, check us out.
Sounds good. I will. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, and it's great talking about bourbon, talking about business, and all the things that are great about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.